Welcome back to Power and Politics. The government today introduced a bill to change the royal line of succession. Changes like this are happening in countries across the Commonwealth where the Queen is still the head of state. Let me show you the changes in the bill. Males will no longer inherit the throne ahead of older female siblings. A monarch or direct heir to the throne will be able to marry a Roman Catholic, and descendants of George II will be able to marry without asking the monarch's permission. Why is it important for Canada to pass this bill? Is there any real opposition to something that seems common sense? Joining me now, the Heritage Minister, James Moore. Good to see you, Minister Moore.
Pleasure.
All right. Why is this so important for Canada to be part of this?
Well, it's a commitment that the Prime Minister made over a year ago that all countries of the Commonwealth would make the changes necessary to modernize the Crown and the succession to Her Majesty the Queen. This is a subject that's sort of been talked about from time to time within the broader context of debates about the monarchy and the future of the Crown. But of course, it didn't come up when Princess Diana gave birth to her two sons, so then the question was put back. But last year, when the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge announced that they were expecting their firstborn this year, then the subject came back into light. And it was actually, Her Majesty the Queen in the Buckingham Palace who made the suggestion that I think everybody agrees with clearly on the surface, that a modernization of the rules of succession to the throne needs to happen, and that's what this legislation is about.
I mean, in a sense, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, the idea that if she gave birth to a daughter, that would be an issue seems absurd in this day and age.
Yeah, and for your viewers who are fully aware of what's happening, is that imagine if this year that Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, gives birth to a daughter, and then the two of them are fortunate to have a second child, and the second child is a son. As the rules are currently written, the son would automatically become the heir to the throne after the Duke of Cambridge, were he to become king. And so what this says is that, no, it erases that, clearly that gender, frankly, discrimination within the current line of succession, and says that the firstborn becomes the heir to the throne. It also takes away the barrier that currently exists that says that whoever the heir to the throne is, be it a she or a he, that if they marry a Catholic, that is no longer prohibited, and that has been prohibited up until now.
What if, just out of interest, what if they married outside of the Christian religion altogether? And you can't do that because they're the head of the church. Is that right?
You can do that. There's no explicit prohibition against any marriage outside, except for Catholics, and that's where the prohibition is now being lifted. So it's a common sense reform. I was asked today, they're about the idea that it still means that the King or Queen of Canada, who Her Majesty is, the Queen of Canada, that there's still a prohibition against a Catholic becoming the King or Queen of Canada, which is true. But the issue here is people often need to be reminded is that Her Majesty is also the head of the armed forces. She's also the head of the Church of England, and to have a Catholic as the head of a Protestant faith is probably not what the faith has in mind.
I mean, I'm not going to get into the broader picture about, you reforming an institution that some people have difficulty justifying in the first place. But there's a constitutional element. And does this change constitute a constitutional amendment? Because after all, constitutional amendments have to, if this affects not just the office of the Queen, but the Queen herself. So should this be a constitutional question, in which case it should have provincial approval?
It is not a constitutional change. It only requires legislative change, or adoption, actually, of new legislation in Canada. None of the 18 countries that are actually having to make this amendment, it's all being done in concert with the UK Parliament. The UK Parliament tabled their legislation in December of just this past year, so just a month and a half ago. They tabled their legislation. It's before the House of Lords now. It'll be voted on in the House of Lords, I understand, in the second week of February. Only 3 other countries other than the UK require legislation: Canada, Australia, New Zealand. None of the other countries in the Commonwealth require legislation. They just need a letter and a consent, and that's it. So it doesn't require constitutional change, just legislation. There was some early debate when the Prime Minister signaled that we were going to do this, that this might require constitutional amendment. It's just not true.
But there's some say it might, and Philippe Lagacé, professor, he has said they should be careful, the provinces, because if they give way on this, it may set a precedent for other constitutional changes that could be made without the consultation, and that would fundamentally alter the 1982 constitutional agreement. What's your view on that?
Don't agree. This is assent to legislation that is being passed in the UK Parliament with regard to succession. There's nothing in the Canadian Constitution in that regard. So this is simply only requires legislation. That's the assessment of the Department of Justice, the Privy Council office, obviously the Governor General's office, and the Palace as well. And we agree. And it's a pretty common sense reform.
Why not fast track it?
Well, we are. We hope it'll be passed rather quickly in the House of Commons. We have the support. I got no questions. We tabled the bill this morning. There were no questions in question period. Even Daniel Paillet, the leader of what's left of the Bloc Québécois, has signaled that they'll consent to this because it's pretty common sense. I mean, the idea that that the daughter of Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge, that if they have a daughter first, that she shouldn't be first in line. Ending gender discrimination is kind of a common sense.
When I said fast track, just the unanimous consent, but it will probably move quickly. But you haven't. Nicholson hasn't sought out unanimous consent on it.
Not yet. It was Thursday, Friday. We'll see what happens next week, but I suspect it'll pass quickly.
All right. That's common sense. One question I wanted to put to you, because in the wake of Jim Flaherty, and you saw probably the cover of the newspaper this morning, a picture of Jim Flaherty, who has told people, and there had been much speculation about his health because his change in his physical appearance, and he's admitted now that he is on a drug called prednisone to deal with a skin condition, a very rare condition, and it's changed his physical appearance. It's caused his sleep patterns to change. And we've been asking our audience, should politicians be required to disclose serious health issues? What's your view on that?
There's some subjectivity and gray area to it, to be frank. I mean, there's a boundary between the public and the private, but when the private interferes or could be seen to be interfering with the public, then I think there's an obligation to disclose. There have been some health issues over many years. I mean, you remember that John Manley had some health challenges when he was the finance minister and deputy prime minister of the country. Keith Ashfield not long ago had some health issues. Joe Oliver as well. He's undergoing. He has some health concerns as well. So I think when you raise those, I think it's important for a number of reasons. But what constitutes a serious health issue is area of subjectivity. I think it's incumbent upon those who are in public office and who have a great deal of responsibility to be honest with the public when they have something that is either interfering with their capacity to do their job or that there's a concern from the public that it might be a barrier to them doing their job. I think Jim Flaherty recognized that. He disclosed it, and I think the really good news certainly for Jim Flaherty is that this is a condition that does not interfere with his ability to be a member of Parliament or a member of Cabinet, and he's done, I think, a very decent and brave thing.
And of course, we all wish his health well. And as you say, it's not a serious issue in the sense of it doesn't impede with his work. But where is that line, though? I mean, and we have this debate a lot about the line between the public and the private life. What should we know about ministers? What should we know about what they do in their personal lives? I mean, how do you draw the line? In this country, we have a line here. In Britain, they have a different line. In the U.S., they have a different line. Do you sense that line's moving?
I don't know, I suppose. And also with media and, frankly, the degree to which people openly talk about things. I mean, look, this is a debate in the United States when FDR had his health challenges. I mean, John F. Kennedy was also a lot more sick than people realized at the time. So this is not new. Jack Layton, he wasn't. We knew that he was struggling with a form of cancer. We didn't know the degree of his cancer. He chose not to make that public, and people now, in retrospect, really appreciate the bravery and respected his privacy. But it was a these are all
blurred. I mean, social media has changed. What's private? But people share their entire lives on Facebook now. So does that change the expectation? Tell us a bit about your private life.
Well, it's true, and look, even for example, Romeo Saganash, right, member of Parliament, New Democrat, I mean, very nice guy. He publicly talked about it's a health challenge, it's a health issue when you are a victim of substance abuse, and that's a chemical. Alcoholism is a disease. It's a medical condition, and he chose to make that public. There are those who I know who in the past who have the same disease of alcoholism who have chosen not to make that public. So it's a subjective thing. People often find in circumstances like that their recovery is aided by keeping it private. Some people find that by making it public, they can overcome it, and because they have some public pressure on these things. So, I don't think there's a clear answer to it, but it's a good debate, and I think it's one that cabinet ministers and people who are not too Orwellian a phrase, but positions of authority have to keep in mind that there needs to be a public perception that you can do your job with the full energy that the office commands.
Jim Flaherty said he'd spoken to the Prime Minister about it, but for the rest of the cabinet and/or the caucus. Was it even a surprise for them to disclose that? And can you tell us the reaction today?
I learned about it, frankly, in the Globe and Mail today. So I tend to keep my private life private, and I respect other people's privacy. If he chose to make it public, I'm sure that he did so for the right reasons, and I think he's done so with decency. And was the reaction inside, was it interesting? All your colleagues kind of... I think it's just a very human reaction. Obvious concern, relief that it appears to be nothing obviously serious. We wish him all the best, and I thought it was a very graceful graceful thing that was done by the NDP and the opposition to wish him well. These things happen from time to time. Bruce Heyer of the NDP, or formerly of the NDP, he's just coming back from throat surgery. So it's
for tongue cancer.
We're all human. We're all frail. We all have our challenges and health challenges, and our families do as well. And as long as we're conscious of those things and we recognize that we all have our challenges and scares in life. So,
Minister of Canadian Heritage, James Moore, great to have you on the program.
Pleasure as always.